Okay, what we've done next is we've taken the valve cover off, and it's actually really simple. It is an 8mm, I believe it's 8mm. Let me just check that. Yep, 8mm 12 point. Okay, these are 12 point bolts, and really there's nothing that makes it easier than having the right tool. But you can see all the little ridges on that head. This is a 12 point bolt. So you need the 12 point socket to really get these off properly, but there's only 4 bolts to hold them in. There's 1, 2, and then there's 2 back there. It's super simple. Once you have this valve block pushed back like it is, they come right off. And we're gonna do this one next. Pretty much the same process and procedure. There's in that little channel right down there, there's 1, and here's the second one there. And then there's again 2 in the back. Once you get those loose, the cover comes right off. Once you get those 4 bolts out, like I said, this thing comes right off. Yep, there we go. It's pretty easy. And one note of caution, I'll just say, here's the valve cover itself, but the gasket stayed on. And let me show you what you want to just be kind of careful of. In this gasket right here, these little metal spacers. So basically when you crank those bolts down, they don't crush the valve cover. What you want to do is be real careful that when you pull this out, all 4 of those, oh my God, one just fell out. So all 4 of them come out with it. Last thing you want is one of these little buggers to go down into your engine, and then you've got other problems. So it just happened right live on camera. So here it is missing, and here it is with it in it. So make sure you have all 4 of them when you pull this out. And unfortunately, that thing fell all the way down. It's a little hard to see, but this definitely takes it all the way down into the engine. So it might be down. I'm sorry, I can't find it with the camera, but anyway, it's down there. And unfortunately, yeah, like it probably went down there, which is where the hydraulic lifters are, and there's some holes that take this all the way down to the bottom of the engine. So I will definitely be on the lookout for that little bugger. Hopefully it's just, if it's not here underneath the valley pan, then hopefully it is easily accessible, and then I'll definitely be looking for that when I take the oil pan off here. So that's definitely something we want to keep an eye on. Okay, next we're going to take off the intake manifold, and these green things are the fuel injectors, and on top of this is part of the fuel rail. So the fuel comes in the back of the engine here, and we'll get into that in a minute. Comes up and loads into this channel here, and then goes down into the fuel injectors. To remove this, there are 12 bolts here, 6 on each side, and these are the 1/2-inch ones I was talking about previously. I've gotten this one loose. They seem to be coming out pretty easily. Again, I'd recommend doing it by hand. These ones here in the middle are a little tough to get to. If you want to take this fuel rail apart, you can. You basically have to gently pull this up and out. Or if you just get a box wrench on these, you can get them out. I've tried a socket with a kind of a wobble or a universal on it, but still it's a little tight. So I would recommend just taking your time and either pulling the whole fuel rail off the top, or just take a box wrench and work at it slow and get it. If you have a ratcheting box wrench, even better. That should help. But we're gonna take these 12 bolts out, and then I'll show you what we're gonna do with the fuel rail where it attaches to the fuel line. That is pressurized. So you definitely wanna have safety glasses on. I even put a little rag around it, so we're gonna show you that in a minute. One thing I like to do is to just keep track of things, where the bolts go and in what order. Sometimes you pull these out and they might be slightly different lengths. So you want to make sure they go back in the same exact spot they came out of. So what I do is I just create a little cardboard template here. I have F for the front of the engine, rear for the rear, and then I even put left and right on here and a little steering wheel. But basically I just punch some holes in the cardboard and the bolt goes in the appropriate hole. In this case, this is the third bolt from the front, so it'll go right in the little hole there, and hopefully that helps you keep track of things. All right, now that we've got the bolts out of the manifold intake here, now it's time for it to come loose, not out. So these, it looks like somebody may have been in here at one point, maybe head gaskets were done, I don't know, but these things tend to stick in here pretty good. So what I like to do is I drive very gently a screwdriver in right around here, sorry. And you have to be real careful because this is a coolant passage here. So you don't want to crack this area or start digging in this right here. I go off to the side here. I've had luck on both sides and just kind of working my way in. There's a small gap here between the head and this intake. And usually with some very gentle, patient hammer and small screwdriver, it will pop out of there. Once it loosens up, we're going to disconnect the fuel line, which is in the back. And that is that green going into the silver. That's pressurized, and that's what I was warning, and we're going to show you how to safely remove that in just a minute. All right, this one was being pretty stubborn, and I actually figured out that there is a bolt here. I could have just not been remembering, or actually this is sticking pretty good. So I think somebody may have put some RTV or something in here to hold the valley pan gasket to the intake. That's not usual, but in this case, I think that's what somebody did. So it was really, really stuck. Once I undid this bolt to hold the valley pan secure, actually getting my screwdriver in here, it did just kind of pop right up. So we're making some progress here. That was a little unexpected, but just be aware that can happen. Okay, I'm gonna capture this zoomed in the best I can, but that green connection is the back of that fuel rail. And so what you do is if you push in this way and then you pinch, there's I think it's on the bottom here, right where my finger is on the bottom, you pinch that in. So if you push in, pinch, it should come right off that way. But again, because it's pressurized, expect to see some fuel. So what I do is just simply cover it with a little bit of a just a little bit of a rag, so that if it does spray up, you're okay. It's gonna hopefully just soak into the rag. Took a little bit of persuasion, but I did get it loose, and I'm gonna pull this out of here now that everything's disconnected. There will be some residual coolant in these passages, so just be ready for that. Any towels you have laying around, and this should come right out of there. Looks like we're doing great. Now that we got the intake manifold completely out, we're down to the valley pan. Look at that. It's not great. I have no idea what all that stuff is. There's a leaf coolant that I just spilled. But this is probably, who knows, could have been coolant and oil mixed together and just dried up over the years. But, get that out of there next. And there's just that one remaining 13 millimeter bolt that same that was in the front, along with a little clamp that holds that in. And we just removed that 13 millimeter, and this valley gasket should come right out. Any of this debris down in the engine, so I'm going to be very careful to not do that. And then, fortunately, I see what I was looking for. We're going to use this magnet, and guess what? There it is. That's the little piece that fell off when I was removing the valve cover gasket. that fell down in here. Probably not real good for an engine to grind that up. So I'm glad I was able to find that pretty quickly. We're down quite a bit now into the engine here. We're looking at the tops of the heads with these, the lifters, hydraulic lifters here at the bottom. Those are the cylindrical things here. They're sticking up in different angles, and then you've got the push rods, and those go up to the top part of the engine here. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to start loosening the bolts on the top of these rocker arms to get those loose on each side. There are 4 bolts. I think these are 15 millimeter. I'll confirm here in a second. And these, I think these should be loosened in a very specific manner. You don't want to loosen one on just one side and work your way down one at a time. You want to do it consecutively. So like this first one, and then the third one, and then the second one, and the fourth one, in that order, a few turns each one. The reason for that is this rod that runs through, you don't want to bend that. And if you just release all the tension and the pressure on one of these bolts, then you're putting a lot of pressure down the line, which can crack this or bend it, and then you've got bigger problems. And just a quick correction from the previous minute ago. I said 15 millimeter. These are actually 14 millimeter. So these tops of the rocker arms, 14 millimeter socket. All the bolts now are free on the rocker arms, and what I've done is I put a little tag on it. I want to remember that this is the right side of the vehicle. This will not go on the other side, and I want to make sure that it is consistent because I'm doing some rebuild on this engine, but I'm not a total overhaul. It only has 80,000 miles, I think, somewhere in that area. So while it might need a refresh, I don't see anything that indicates that things are significantly worn so far. Sometimes these rocker arms can be a point of failure. I've had them where literally one of the lobes has broken off and is just sitting in there, and you've got a misfire for a real good reason. So we're gonna gently lift this out of here. We want these push rods to stay down for now. Doesn't matter if they come up, I guess, at this point, but we're gonna just lift this gently out of here and set it on the bench. We're gonna clean it up. We are going to next remove some things from each side of the engine. First, we're gonna work on getting these secondary air injection valve blocks and the corresponding hose that leads down into the head. We're gonna get these off. I don't have a proper wrench for this. I'm gonna use this adjustable wrench. It's a little bigger than an inch, and I just can't seem to find the right spanner for it, so this adjustable wrench will do well. But keep in mind, watch this, when you start to move these things, they can start to twist the actual piping itself. So you really gotta get a hand on this part that's kind of kinked. It's supposed to be, I don't know what you call that, like accordioned, whatever you call it, but allows this angle to happen. You got to really hold on to this as you're turning this loose from the head. After that, we're going to use a 12-point socket on the ends of these exhaust we're going to use this 12-point socket on the ends of these manifold bolts. There's 8 on each side. So again, look, you can see this is a 12-point socket, and you don't want to use really anything else. You don't want to ruin these. Getting them out is already hard enough. I've oiled these down with penetrating fluid for the last, frankly, week. I've probably hit them 3 or 4 times, maybe more. They seem to be loose, so just a firm grip on this and they seem to be coming out. So once you get all of these out, all 8 of them on each side, you are pretty much then free to start removing the big heavy duty bolts here that hold the heads on. And there's again 8 on here, or maybe even 10. So we'll get to that in a minute, but first thing we're gonna do is get these, the side off, and then we'll move to the driver's side, and we'll report back here shortly. All right, the manifolds are loose. There, as I mentioned, are 8 bolts, 2 on the top of each one of these. And, you know, they're in there. They're supposed to be pretty tight. There's a metal gasket that will fall out once you undo that. And there's, they look like they're kind of doubled up here. So there's like 2 of them stacked on top of each other, which isn't a bad idea. So I'd plan on 8 of them. When you replace these, get 8 new ones and stack them up. I'm having a bit of a hard time with this. So I think I'm going to remove the head with the 10 bolts that are in here. We'll get to that in a minute. But I'm just going to take the secondary air pipes off with the head, because I don't want to twist these to the point where they rip. They're just kind of really locked in there. And I think if I can get a something on the bottom, very bottom of this right here, inside of there, hold that, and then undo this nut, it might come. But at this point, it's twisting this all up, and I don't want to tear this. So I'm going to go to plan B, and that is remove the head with that attached to it. Okay, next I wanted to show you, these are push rods, and they sit on top of these hydraulic lifters right here. These are the lifters. And what you can do is, when you remove these, they just come right out. Sometimes they will pull that hydraulic lifter. You can see it kind of came out with it. That's okay, because these are going to come out anyhow. But what I like to do is, if I'm going to reuse these, and I probably will, I'm going to put them right back in the same exact order. And how I do that is I have a little cardboard box, and I'm just going to put them in the box in the right order so that I get them back in properly. Because if the engine is used to operating in a certain way with these rods that have been in place for the last 80,000 miles, I would like to keep them running just like that in the same order. So I'll pop them in there, and that way I know which way they go back in. All right, we're removing these head bolts. I remember this from the last time I did this job, that these bolts here are about 16 millimeter. 15 millimeter socket is too small, and a 16 millimeter is just wobbles on here just a little. I really don't like that. Wish it was more firm. I've tried a SAE as well, and I can't really find anything that fits firmly on there. So I can't impress upon you how tight these bolts are. When we torque them down, you'll see there's a process to do that, and there's an extreme amount of torque on these. So these things are absolutely in here firmly. And what I'm doing is, I was using a 2-foot breaker bar to try to break these loose. And what happens is you definitely put some really big pressure on it to get these to crack loose. The last thing in the world you want to do is start stripping these bolts, stripping the head of the bolt. If you do that, it is really difficult then to get that bolt out. You're gonna really have to use an extractor, and then it's not easy. So you could get the engine out at this point. It's just a little easier taking the heads off anyway. And what I like to do is, when I take these heads off, seeing how tight these things are cranked down, I like the engine to be sitting in the vehicle, because I need to leverage in order to get them loose. And then when I get the engine back in, I'm gonna get it seated and positioned and bolted back in before I do the head gaskets, because again, I need the leverage. I don't know any other way to do this on an engine stand. But anyway, what I'm gonna do right now is I'm using the 16 millimeter, this is a 1/2-inch drive ratchet socket, and then I've got this big pipe here. This is a kind of a leverage pipe, a cheater pipe. But what I'm doing is I'm just basically putting it together here, and I'm gonna try to use some leverage to get these to crack. And I'm not using the 2-foot breaker bar anymore, because I just needed I just couldn't get the right angle on this. And so I'm using this cheater bar and this socket. So listen for the crack here. Hopefully we get it. There we go. And it sounds a little scary, but that's definitely the sound I wanted to hear. And we're just going to work our way down here to each one of these head bolts. These are not going to be easy to get to because of this secondary air injection. So it's like, boy, I don't know what to do. We're going to have to figure this out. But this one down here, next to the secondary air, right where I'm pointing, there's a head bolt down there. And if this secondary air pipe wasn't there, it would be a heck of a lot easier to get to that bolt. So I've got a chicken and egg situation, and have to figure out what I do. Okay, so I'm at a bit of an impasse right now. I can't get the head off with the secondary air injection pipes into the head, and I can't get the secondary air injection pipes out. So I happen to have a spare one of these, and I can see, you know, what the challenge is here. So basically, you have this this part screws into the head right here, and this nut screws onto this stub. On this side, somebody got that stub out, and you have this nut that spins freely, which is what you would really hope it to do. But apparently it's, you know, kind of locked in place. This one is probably, they ran into the same problem. So I think once they got this one out, in a way, they were maybe able to, you know, twist the whole thing out, including the stub. I'm gonna continue to work on getting this loose, one of the sides loose. I've been trying to hold on to this stub with, you know, with vice grips, and I just can't get a real good grab on it. But anyway, it's definitely a challenge, and if I figure out a technique here, it'll be in the next video here. All right, what I've done is I've managed to get a pair of vice grips on that stub, and I think I've successfully managed to loosen this. Seems to be turning now, so that's really good news. I don't think I'm gonna have to ruin this secondary air injection pipe. That's awesome news. Okay, that trick actually worked pretty well. What I had to do was really muscle this manifold around now that I have it loose, and just get a real good grip on this with the vice grip. And it took some pressure, but I was able to break that nut loose and got the whole thing off. So here it is right here. That's great. Again, I can save that pieces. They're very expensive to replace. Next thing I'll do is get these stubs out of here. They should be pretty easy to get loose. They're actually already loose. So these out, and then that'll allow me to get to this bolt right here. That's the head bolt that I couldn't get to with the secondary air stub in the way. Okay, I got one of the stubs out, and this one's being a little difficult. So just so you know, behind, right about here, behind these threads, you don't want to mess these threads up. There's a approximately 20 millimeter or 3/4 would also do it, but you can just get your wrench on, and you can go a little bit at a time. You flip it around, and you can grab the top side of it, and then keep going about 100 million times, and you'll get this thing out of here. There's a lot of threads. It's pretty deep in the head, so, but just so you know, you can do it. The head bolts are out, but I gotta tell you, these things are in there. To say that you would need Hercules and 6 of his brothers is an understatement. These things are really, really cranked in, and that's by design. They're supposed to be very, very tight, and specifically torqued to a lot of foot-pounds or Newton meters, whichever measurement system you use. Again, on this job, I'll be honest, it helps to have a second set of hands. You have to get these bolts out, and they are in there, and to have somebody kind of steady the wrench, hold it flat on there while somebody then uses every muscle they have in their body to push and push them left to loosen them up is an understatement. It is very very difficult job to do on your own. I managed to do it, but I'd like to have a helper next time. And one really important point to to talk about here is there are 10 bolts, as I mentioned. 3 of them are longer than the other 7. So you have 1, 2, 3. These 3 in the middle are longer bolts. So when you go to put them back in, you'll know, because you'll see these 3 here were for the middle, and then these are for the rest. They're all the same. Now, these bolts you cannot reuse. You must get new bolts because these are designed to stretch as you're torquing them down, and they are single-use bolts. So you cannot reuse these. You should not reuse these. Now, we're going to save these because we're going to use these bolts to help us pull the engine out when we hook the chain hoist to it. So we're going to save these for now for one more use, and then we can recycle them. All right, next the head really should come right off. I've already loosened the bolts from the manifold here, so that's ready. The secondary air injection is off, as you saw, and with any luck, this might just kind of pop right out of here. Yeah, actually, there it is. It's actually pretty easy to get off there. So we're gonna try to lift this thing straight off, and we wanna be real careful that we don't, oh, there's some coolant. I forgot about that. I gotta come back and get that pan, hang on. Right, so there was some coolant left over in the system. I completely forgot about that, but I have a pan underneath there and I just had to readjust it. So the coolant passages will be full, and we wanna be real gentle when we pull this thing out because I don't wanna damage any of the aluminum on these heads. And I'm trying to do it with one hand and it just requires 2. So let's see if we can get this camera situated. And there we go. A couple of vent hoses back here, which should pop right out. There's one, and this one should pop out. There we go. All right, we are good to go. So this will come straight out, and this is a good time to inspect. Typically, if you have a coolant leak, coolant will escape in from the head gasket into the cylinder, where it then will combust, usually not well, with the fuel that gets in through the valves here. If you have a coolant leak, a lot of times these the top of the cylinder head here, where the valves are, will be really clean. And they call it steam cleaning because the coolant has some water in it and it does tend to boil off when it sparks and the fuel ignites. So basically what I'm looking at so far is the pistons look dirty like they should, which leads me to believe there's nothing wrong with the head gasket at this time. It seems to be holding and we are okay, but obviously we're gonna do this as a preventative measure. So we have new head gaskets on. And when we go to sell it on, we can document this video. All right, here's the one side with the head off. And like I said, the pistons all look fairly even. This is where that coolant jacket was. When I pulled the head off, it was spilling from there, still in the engine. So it had filled this cylinder up. Not to worry though, it was definitely not a leak into that cylinder head. It just had come from that passage right there. You can see the coolant down in there. Anyway, we're getting there. We got to do the other side, and then we might be ready to go underneath. First thing we're going to do when we go underneath is we're going to remove this heat shield right here, which is for the starter. And once we remove that, we'll be able to undo a couple of the bolts, and we'll get to that in a little bit. The other side, get that head off there, and then we'll get it up in the air. All right, now we are working on the left side of the vehicle, the driver's side here in the US. And first thing we have to do is remove the manifold bolts. There's 8 of them, 4 on the top, 4 on the bottom of the manifold. The ones in the back are probably a little tricky to get to, but you know, again, the right tools will make this an easier job. Again, this is a 12-point socket that matches the the nut of the bolt head right there. You can see that's an odd shape if you haven't seen that before. So that 12 point fits this perfectly, and it's the right tool for the job. So in this case, again, just lefty-loosey, and away we go. Got the manifold disconnected, and just fair warning, the weight of the manifold, it will fall down a little bit, so you might want to support it with something, even like a strap or a pretty decent bungee cord, just so that it doesn't crash down. It probably won't hurt anything, but just be aware that it can fall. Once you get the last bolt out, you'll feel a lot of pressure on it, and that's because it's being pulled down by gravity. All right, then getting the secondary air injection tubes out was the same as the other side. I've got one though, this back one here is really not coming out, so I've decided it had to be sacrificed. I can't get a wrench on behind it with enough grip to loosen it. It is just really in the head, and again, it obstructs the head bolt that's back in here behind the wrench here that I have. But the only way I could get this out was to clamp this vice grip on and give it hell. So that's unfortunate, but I do have a spare nub, a little whatever that is that comes out of the head into the secondary air injection tubes. So that little nub that comes out is going to be thrown away. I have an extra one, so just be aware. That could be an issue. And one further thing, once you get this locked on here with the vice grips, my gosh, I needed some leverage, so I had to use this 2.5 foot pipe here kind of around the handle of the vice grip, and then when I do that, I'm able to get some leverage and actually spin this thing around. I'll tell you what, it is really in there, so just be aware. Okay, I finally got that secondary air injection stub out of there, and yeah, just noticing how dirty the threads are in there to begin with. Might be worth cleaning that up for sure. I'm going to clean these heads up, and depending on how they look, I'm going to potentially have them planed just to get them perfectly flat. So we'll see about that. All right, next we're going to go in and get these head bolts out. Again, these are in with Herculean strength. There are 10 of them, and remember the 3 in the middle here are the long ones, so when we put it back together we'll go through that as well. And one important thing here is this head has a ground strap attached to it, so that is actually right there, and that goes to the back of the head, which you can't see behind this hose, but it is attached there. So when you pull the head off, you want to make sure this is disconnected so you don't tear anything or do any damage, but definitely want to disconnect this. It looks like a 10 millimeter, and then when you're putting it back together, that's really important to not forget that one, to put it back. Removing the head bolts, actually these weren't too bad. They all have pretty easy access to get to, except for that one way down in there at the very end underneath where this ground strap is. That was a pretty hard one to get to, so what you need is basically a wobble extension on a shorter socket. And again, these are 16 millimeter. And with some, frankly, brute force, I was able to break it loose, and we'll be getting this head out of here shortly. On the back of this head, there's a 13 millimeter bolt that holds this wire harness sturdy, but my attempts to remove that, which is right here, let's see if we can focus in on it, right here on the back of the head, it was really jammed in there, and anyway, as I was trying to get it loose, it just kind of tore away from the whole harness, tore away. There's like a metal strap here that we may have to replace, so keep that in mind. That's back there. Now the head's actually ready to come off, and I was able to get it again, a catch pan underneath, because there's more coolant in the system back here in this channel. So right, get the wires out of the way, and we should have this out of there. And there we go. And again, just like the other side, I'm pretty happy to see that the tops of the pistons are kind of, you know, black and charred like you'd expect to see. Again, if you see one of them that looks like it's steam cleaned and real shiny, then you definitely know there's an issue with leaking head gasket. But in this case, looked like the head gasket was probably okay. Again, we're going to do it anyway. Obviously, we have it apart, and hopefully many miles to go. Okay, we're up and under the vehicle right now. First thing you got to do is get the starter heat shield out. I actually already did it. I had an opportunity, but the phone wasn't close by. So anyway, this is the heat shield here. Get rid of this glove so you can see it. But this is up in basically this position up. And you'll see there's a clamp right there that holds on to part of the starter. And then this little pesky bolt right here. That guy lives way up here, and you got a feel for it. Basically, it's in this engine mount, right up there. You can just see the little hole. I can barely get the camera up there, so that little hole here in the engine mount has this bolt right here, and it's a 10 millimeter, and you just get a small extension, and you can get it out. It actually wasn't real bad, but it was just actually more hard to locate it and then get it started. Once you got it started, it came out pretty easily. So once you pull this down, believe it or not, the easiest way is to fish it out of the front. So you bring it down next to the engine, and then it comes right out this way. All right, next we've got to, I'll probably clean this engine up. Once you get like grease all over your gloves or your hands, it just goes then everywhere. So I'll probably wipe this down, but next thing we're gonna do is these are cooler lines for I think this is for the transmission here. And there's 2 of them, and they're held on by these 10 millimeter bolts. And you can see that one up in there. So while you have your 10 millimeter socket out, good idea to get these 1, 2, there might be 3 or 4 of them in total. But once you get those loose, then this is gonna allow the access to a few things we're gonna need to get to. And then of course you can't pull the engine with these attached. So we'll get those out here next. All right, transmission cooler lines are undone. I like to put those bolts, like I said, right back where they go. This one was a 10 millimeter, but the ones back here are actually 8 millimeter. It's a little tough to see, but it's that one back there. So this is basically loose and free from the engine. Next, we're gonna work on the starter. I have this long pair of needle nose pliers, and there's let's see if I can do this one-handed, but back here, there is this one single wire, and it resides on the top of the starter. So I just grabbed this and it came right undone. And then back here, it appears from a distance that this is a 13 millimeter, and that has to come undone. That's the main wire to the starter. And once we undo that, we're good on that. And we'll move on to disconnecting the bolts for the flex plate. And I already preemptively pulled the plug out, which is way back there. It's a black plug. And again, I use these needle nose pliers. I just grabbed the end of it. There's a little tab that sticks out, and it just pulled right out. Then we'll go through this in a minute, but here at the crankshaft pulley, that's probably 17 or 19 millimeter bolt there. And we're gonna use a socket and an extender to turn the engine so that we can see those flex plate bolts. I think there are 4, there might be 6, I can't remember, but we're gonna get to that next. We got the 13 millimeter nut off of the starter cable, and then I quickly realized I got a few more things to do. So right here under this motor mount is a knock sensor, and there's a real easy little plug right here. Just basically pinch and it comes right out, and that's what it should look like. And then we've got a couple of zip ties that hold this wire bundle to the motor mount as well. This will have to be snipped off. Maybe not. Take that back. I think if we keep the motor mount there, I don't know quite where we're going to unbolt it, but anyway, we'll see if we have to snip those or not, but that's an easy thing to do. All right, now we're looking down the side of the oil pan here. This is the passenger side in the US. I guess it might be the driver's side, other parts of the world, but anyway, the flex plate connects to the transmission and flywheel and so forth. And there are 4 bolts in here that I confirmed. And basically what I'm doing is I've got this wrench up here on the crankshaft pulley, and it is a, I think it's a 24 millimeter. Let me just check here. Yeah, it's a 24 millimeter. And I have that up on the bolt up there. So basically what we're gonna do is just simply turn this. We're turning the engine when we do this. So we're gonna turn that. And then as we do, let me see if I can zoom in here. We're gonna keep our eye in that hole right there. And eventually we're gonna see, as we turn the wrench, that's what we're looking for right there. So we're gonna use a long extension back through this channel right here, and we're going to use that 13 millimeter socket and break that loose. So we've got 4 to do, and I'll report back here when they're all out. All right, for the last bolt that's in the flex plate, just want to show you what I'm using here. So I ended up going to a 1/2 inch long socket with an impact socket on it. These bolts are on here pretty tight. When I took them off, I did notice that there was Loctite, which would be expected. You don't want those things coming loose inside of the engine there. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna get the last one here. We'll do it live on camera. I'm gonna crank the engine around here if I can get on that crankshaft bolt here again. Okay, here we go. So we're gonna turn this around gently until we see the last one. Oh yeah, there it is. Okay. Get back a little bit there. Okay. Get that just about in the middle of the hole there. I'll zoom in now so you can see it. So what I'm going to do now is I have a 2-foot breaker bar, and that's going to connect to the end of this basically with a little bit of kind of feel. You'll find it'll find its way onto the head of the bolt. There we go. So, all right, so now it's on there. Kind of nicely rests up on that area right here. So let me see if I can angle this. So it rests up there decently. And I have this 2-foot breaker bar right here. And that was really the only thing I could do to get this thing loose. So they're on there pretty good. So latch that on. And then give it a good crank. And once you break it loose, there we go. Then I take the 2-foot breaker off. I leave the socket on there if I can. And then I just use my regular ratchet. Just a 1/2 inch ratchet. And on the end of this extension. And it should get them right off. So we'll fast forward through this. All right, next we've got some bolts to undo here that connect really the engine to the bell housing. I think we need to remove this plate. I think we've got to get to the torque converter. These look to me like 8 millimeters. I'll get back to you on this, but I think this plate needs to come off. But basically we've got these, I think these are 13 millimeters, and there's 4 on the side here from basically 3 o'clock all the way to 9 o'clock. And then there's ones at the top that we'll get when we get there. But there's also a couple of tricky ones that are, I believe, up inside of here, and then on the other side up in here as well. So they face this way, and then they also face towards the back. So we'll get those out and make progress. And very handy to have just a basic pair of safety glasses when you're working under a vehicle. A lot of times, you know, again, just for pure safety's sake, you don't want something to go in your eyes, but really sometimes stuff hits your face and you got to stop and get a towel and, you know, wipe it off. So having this is really helpful. So we are still removing the bolts from the what is the engine into the transmission bell housing. And so there's two on this side. I'm on the passenger side of the vehicle, the right-hand side. And these are, again, 13 millimeter. They just come right out of there. You might recognize that hole is where we remove the bolts from the flex plate. So we're actually just right next to it on these two bolts. There's two on the other side, and we're making some good progress here. We're gonna get to the motor mounts next, and I think we might be ready to pull this engine. Next step actually is we've got to drain the oil. Okay, here comes the oil. I'm reasonably certain that my catch can is not too full. I've had it overflow before, so that's a good thing to check before you do this, which I'm pretty good at. There we go. That's actually pretty fresh Rotella oil, so it's going to look a little darker than normal for fresh oil, but that's Rotella is normally that way. Okay. Okay, we're going to take the oil filter out. I like these big, oh, sorry about the noise. I like these big Purolator filters. Doesn't say it on here, but I've got a whole big box of these things. I like them. They keep a lot more oil in the filter, obviously, because they're twice the size of a normal one. But I read somewhere that this larger filter does tend to create a little more oil pressure. And particularly in the 2003 Discovery, they can suffer from oil pump failures. And if yours is either failed or, you know, maybe hasn't yet, it might. And keeping the oil pressure up is obviously key for a engine that needs to have that oil all the way to the top of the engine. So this is the one I use. We're going to remove that, and next we are on to the motor mounts. Okay, I've been really racking my brain on how this is going to come out of here. I've got the bottom nuts zipped off the engine mounts on both sides here. I got kind of a problem, and I don't know how I'm going to get around it, but we'll figure something out. But I can't, this is up in the air, so I don't want to lower it down, but right there, that pipe that you're looking at, this area here, that is the manifold. And I think these need to come out. I don't know any other way I'm going to pull this out with the motor mounts attached to the side of the block unless I remove the manifolds themselves. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I think this should just come straight up then. On the other hand, I did see online where these mounts may have to come out completely. So I did remove two of the bolts that are here, and I think there's one at the top there. Here's where it's not really, it's actually pretty sad. But I had a really hard time with this particular bolt getting it out. There's just not a lot of space to remove that bolt. So I used the ratcheting box wrench, but as I was making progress on it, it started to hit and it's stuck up in there. And if you know anything about a ratcheting box wrench, it only goes one way unless you flip it around. But I cannot get it off because I backed the bolt out and now it's pinched up against the bracket. So I'm thinking if I just, since I've undone that, maybe on this side I can just come up enough. And I don't know, because the whole thing the whole engine needs to drop down a little bit so that you can get to the 4 back bolts on the top of the bell housing. And I'll show you that if I ever get to it, but I hope I don't have to destroy this tool I don't quite know what I'm going to do, but I guess I'll start right here. I'll get these 3 nuts off and remove the manifolds from the downpipes here. All right, we got the manifolds out of here. I got this top bolt out of the engine support, the motor mount, and the 2 on the bottom I already had out. What we're going to try to do is now lift this thing up. This is called a load leveler, and of course I had to buy a new one. Why? Because I can't find my old one. I think it's on another engine I have out to be rebuilt, so I may have forgotten about it. But anyway, new load leveler, and what happens is we basically take these and we can use then those head bolts that we saved from earlier, and we're going to basically just run these through as far down as we can get them. Get this at the right angle. Maybe this is the right way to do it. Maybe this is the right way. I'm not quite sure yet, but we're going to use these bolts to hold this in. We're going to raise this up a little bit, see if we can get the motor mounts out, and then we're going to lower it and get to the top bolts. The engine crane is hooked up and hooked to the load leveler, and then these head bolts are going right back into the heads, into the block itself. Obviously you don't want to crank them down too far, just until I just did it till it got finger tight. But you can see that we are basically ready to lift this up. We're gonna just do one more lift here. Let's see if we can get it up a little bit here. Yeah, there we go. Starting to move. That's good. So now we're gonna see if we can get this right on there. One thing I think I forgot is there's a little, it's a 13 millimeter, holds that wire on right down here. This wire here. This is actually held to the block with a 13 millimeter bolt, so we're going to remove that before we pull the engine up any higher. And then the other thing I wanted to make sure, you don't want to crush anything back there when you're lifting the engine up. So make sure that fuel line and anything else is out of there as you lift it up. Good news for me, once I got this engine lifted up these few inches here, I was able to get that stuck wrench off. Apparently once you loosened it up and got it to move a little bit, I was able to get the wrench off, and then I was actually able to take the bolt out by hand, and then I got the motor mount out. So we're ready to basically lower this down. But there's one more thing here. There's this one sensor here that I need to unplug, and I think, I can't remember what that is, cam sensor or something, but I gotta get that undone before I pull it out. In order to get this plug out way down here, I just can't seem to figure it out, so I'm just gonna remove the water pump at this point. It's only a few minutes. Basically, I just secured the pulley with a pair of vice grips very gently and removed these 3 bolts, and then just going around here, there's a handful of 10 millimeters, and then the ones that are not 10, they're actually 11 millimeter. And so this bottom one here, again, have your catch pan ready, because this is a coolant jacket bolt, flows right through the coolant jacket, so there could be some remaining coolant in the engine, and when you remove this bolt here, it could come out. All right, here's that plug. I just couldn't figure out, it's actually pretty simple, but I couldn't get my thumb on it with the water pump, so push down there and it comes off. All right, we are going to lower the engine down, and we're gonna do this very gently. Oh, I forgot to mention, I put a strap, like a ratchet strap underneath the engine. Let me see if I can show you that. Basically, I didn't want it to kind of crash down. I put a block of wood in there. I don't know if you can see it or not, but here's the ratchet strap. So I put it in because I was concerned that when I would lower it, it could lower that part down onto the cross member and, like, I don't know, damage the engine in some way. So I decided I would just put that strap underneath just to support it a little bit. All right, so we're gonna lower this down. And we just wanna be able to get to those top bolts in the back. So here we go, very slowly. Not sure if that's good enough. We'll stop it for now. Oh, there's the extra coolant. All right, let's see if we can get to these bolts back here now. You know, we've got a few inches, so I'm going to stop recording and see if we can't find those 4 top bolts. All right, the top bolts are visible, and I think I can get to them. So this is an example of which one we're looking at right there. There's one down here, and then on the opposite side there are, sorry about that, there are 2 more. I'm going to assume they're 13 millimeter if they're anything like the rest. So with any luck, we'll get these out of here. Okay, the 4 bolts at the top are out. They're about this size. Again, it's 13 millimeter, and I'll tell you what, I've never been more thankful to have this ratchet. It's got to go in this way, and it's super helpful to have this angle towards you or towards the front of the vehicle. I could even get a little breaker bar on here because 2 of the 4 of them were actually pretty tight. The other 2 were actually surprisingly loose, but this took a while, so be patient. They come out, but it was some work. This tool made it infinitely easier. I can't imagine trying to do this with a regular socket handle because this angle, just, you have the bulkhead or the firewall, you're right up against it. So this was a very good tool. Okay, let's see how we do. I have done a quick check over every area that I can, on both sides, the back, the front. I think everything is ready to go. And with any luck, this thing should break free, I guess. Let's see how we do, ladies and gentlemen. I'm gonna go real gentle with this. So much for being gentle.
One time I walked outside, saw a storm, ran for cover. Temptation stamped me so, as you know. I can't believe what you said to me, don't you see? It's a tornado tearing into me. Broken is my heart since you left.